Thanks for subscribing. If you haven't yet watched the first video in the series, you might want to go back and do that so you can understand why we need the dynamic equity split. In this video, we'll talk about how businesses are actually valued, how to calculate somebody's time into equity, how to track their time, and then we'll walk through an example to see what happens with equity over time. Before we get into it, I have two small asides. If you read the book, Mike Moyer refers to team members, and includes you and me, as grunts, and the method of dynamic equity split as the grunt fund. I'm not going to in this video. I'm just not a huge fan of using the term grunt to describe people. That's a grunt in the picture there. So, but if you're not going to read the book, pretend I didn't say anything. You can just forget I said anything. Secondly, theoretical values are theoretical, meaning this method of calculating ownership has very little to do with calculating the value of a business. Your business has no real dollar value until you have a big investor, or you sell the business, or you start making revenue. Which begs a question, and I'm going to answer that question: how are businesses valued? Well, most of them are valued at a multiple of profit. So let's say I have a lemonade stand and the profit from it is $1,000. I might get lucky if I get to sell that for 3 to 5 times profit, which would be like $3,000 to $5,000. It's just how most businesses work. In hot industries like tech, businesses are valued using other things sometimes, like a multiple of revenue or run rate. Code School sold for 5 to 6 times its run rate, which, in case you're wondering, is you take the last month's revenue and you multiply that times 12 to get sort of your 12-month run rate, because we're dealing with recurring revenue. But don't worry. If you don't get, don't worry about that. Also, one way that companies are valued is by looking at how much other competitors were acquired for. There's a bunch of different ways to value a business. I'm not going to teach you them. Calculating pie slices is about distributing and managing equity fairly, not assessing the dollar value of your business. Jan and I are starting a new company, and neither of us is going to get paid at first. We need to calculate our hourly rates, which will allow us to figure out how much pie we get on an hourly or daily basis. We're going to use a term for this. It's going to be our HRR, or hourly resource rate. And the formula looks something like this. Our HRR equals our fair market salary times 2 divided by 2,000. Don't worry, I'm going to show you where that 2 and 2,000 come from. But for now, let's just follow this logic. If my market salary, I figure out, is 50,000, Jan's market salary is 60,000, my HRR is going to be $50 an hour, and hers is going to be $60 an hour. So let's go through this step by step, starting with where do we get this fair market salary? This is something we agree to based on what they could get if they got a job right now. Based on their skills, what would somebody be willing to pay them? And really, if I had the money, what would I be willing to pay them? So websites like salary.com are really good for looking up this information, or other websites that show salary numbers. So that's where we get fair market salary. And it's okay that Jan has a higher salary than me. That's totally okay, even if I'm the one doing most of the work for the business, even if it's my idea. If she has more experience, then she deserves a higher rate. Why do we multiply by 2? Well, this represents the risk Jan is taking by spending her time working on the startup. I'm hoping that someday I can pay her double what she's putting in as her slice of the pie, double what she's not getting paid. And this represents that risk. Now, you might want to adjust this if your company is further along and there's not much risk involved. You could use a lower multiplier, or even no multiplier. And there's more reasons that it's good to double it that we'll see later in this presentation. Next, why do we divide by 2,000? Well, we need to calculate the hourly rate. We currently have salary doubled, so we do 40 hours per week times 50 weeks in a year, factoring out 2 weeks for vacation. It's a startup. You don't get paid for going on vacation. You just don't. All right. Now, If you're working full-time, optionally, you could calculate a daily resource rate. If you're just working full-time and you don't want to track hours. I like tracking hours, but if you didn't want to, you could do a daily resource rate, in which case you might do fair market salary times 2 divided by 250 days. That's the number of work days in a year minus 2 weeks. So calculate this out. My market salary is $400 a day and Jan's is $480 a day. Cool. As I mentioned, I'm a bigger fan of tracking time than tracking a day rate. And time tracking really, is great to keep track of what we're spending time on so we can look back at that and make sure we're working efficiently. Sometimes time tracking can be a bummer, but it's just a great way to measure your efficiency. And also, if you work twice as much as I do on the business, you get more equity. And that's just more fair. So what might a time log look like? I think it can be intimidating if you haven't done them before. Here's an example. So here I've got a time log. Looks like Jan logged 4 hours, and she just wrote a quick note that she built out user login and tested the launch server. Simple enough. And then I did some logs and did some more, and Jan did one. And as you can see, it's pretty simple. We just write out some description of what we worked on for those sets of hours. And we can just do this once a day. Time logging can be pretty simple. Now, normally we wouldn't calculate our slice of the pie on a weekly basis. That's a bit overkill, but we have some numbers here, so let's do it just for fun. So my total hours are 11, Jan's total hours are 7.5, my hourly rate is 50, hers is 60. So if we do 11 times 50, it's 550, and hers is 450. We calculate that down. Total contributed value is 1,000. So my slice of the pie after 1 week is 55%. Hers is 45%, which of course, it's just the first week, so it's not a lot to measure. Here it's worth mentioning that it's important to focus on building value, not percentage. Your company percentage in this dynamic equity split is going to fluctuate, but the value of the business, the more time you and team members put into it, is going to go up. Let me show you what I mean. So let's say we work on it, me and Jan, 1 year from now, my value is up to about 40,000. Jan's is about 40,000. Oh, and we have a new team member named Tim. He's up to 20,000. So total contributed value, 100,000. My slice is 40, Jan's is 40, Tim's is 20. So as you can see here, I have 15% less than a year ago, but I have 40% of a company that has a higher contributed value, that has a higher value because we all put into it. That's just fine. And someday an investor might come along. They might say, hey, I value your business at $500,000 and I want to invest. That's 5 times our total contributed value. That's a pretty good deal. That's showing me that my time was worth a lot, at least 5 times. We were doubling it. So really it was worth 10 times the effort I put into it. That's pretty good. Thanks for watching part 2. At this point, you're probably wondering, does equity actually change dynamically here on a daily basis? Or maybe what happens when somebody needs to work for both cash and equity? And does this methodology encourage people to just bill lots of hours to get tons of equity? These are all good questions, which we will address in part 3 tomorrow. Divided by 250 days. I don't really know. I don't know the number. Where did that number come from? I will need to find out. $480 a day. Cool. Cool. It's cool. I don't know why I keep on saying cool.